Elizabeth Eckel, and you're watching Eye on Public Works, Peoria's go-to show for what's happening in Peoria's Public Works Department. Most of us rely on Peoria's streets and sidewalks to get around every day, but you probably don't realize what it takes to keep them in working condition. Here to talk about the Pavement Management Program is Maher Hazin, Peoria's Deputy Public Works Utilities Director. Welcome to the show, Maher. First of all, what is the Pavement Management Program and how is it utilized in the city?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of people don't really understand it. A pavement management program is really a program that assesses, evaluates, and sets priority on the pavement within a particular agency. Really, the overall goal is to increase the expected life of the city's transportation system in the most economical and efficient manner. Now, as you can see on the screen in front of you, this is really a summary of a pavement performance chart. What it has in it on the bottom is the pavement age, and along the side is the pavement condition. And if you follow the graph along the line, that's sort of the average cycle of pavement. So when the pavement is first starts out or being laid out brand new, you start at the left. It's at 100% condition and it has zero life. As the life of the pavement progresses, different types of treatments are needed. If you absolutely leave the pavement alone and don't do anything to it, the life of it won't be maintained. So it's similar like a human life. You know, if you don't go to the doctor, you don't maintain it, you don't take supplementals, you don't do any of this information, it's very difficult to extend a person's life. So the pavement is the same way. So there are certain procedures that you have to do along the life of the pavement to make sure that its life is maintained. The treatments that we do early on in the stage are less costly, but they only work during the earlier stages. As the pavement condition progresses and degrades, then at that point, more aggressive types of treatments are needed, which are more costly. And ultimately, at some point, even with all of the preservation efforts that we've done, the pavement at some point needs to be rehabbed and reconstructed from scratch. And that really starts out the cycle.
I was going to ask you, what are some of the conditions or problems that you have in the beginning of the life of the pavement?
Well, to start out with any pavement, you need to make sure, just like a house, you need to make sure that the foundation is very good. So what we refer to in a road, it's not really the foundation, but more of the subgrade. It's really the soil underneath. So if you have a soil that has a lot of what is referred to as clay content, or perhaps maybe there's water, or it's not compacted properly, or there may be utilities that got done but not properly backfilled, all of these things won't provide a good structure to the underlying soil. So you've got to make sure that you build that road from the bottom up in a proper manner. Also, if you've got kind of bad soil conditions or not desirable soil condition, there are treatments that you can do to the pavement. So when we start out with a brand new road, whether it's us, the city, building it, or a developer that's coming in as part of their development, we test the roads and we find out what kind of soils they are, and the recommended treatments are done. And based on the type of road it is, the soil design is done. So just like, you know, a building, if you want to put a piece of wood or a piece of metal, you have to design it for the load that's on it, the same thing here in roads. So if you're having a major roadway like an arterial, like a Bell Road or a 67th Avenue or a 75th Avenue, those types of roads need to be heavier built because they're going to see more traffic, a lot more heavier traffic on them. So you need to build those differently than perhaps a residential road will see lesser amount of traffic and lighter types of vehicles. So all of that impacts how we design it. So that's first and foremost.
Okay.
Second item you've got to make sure of is that these roads are inspected so that if you see problems early on, that those are identified and fixed as early as possible. And then ultimately, as the road conditions continues, you're constantly providing the treatment. There's oil content in the asphalt that has to be replenished every so often. The sun beating on the asphalt itself, will degrade the asphalt, so you have to go in and do treatments. And then ultimately, you may have to provide some sort of surface treatments or there'll be cracking that will occur, so you go in and crack fill those. So all these are types of treatments that you've got to do to make sure that the road pavement is maintained for as long as possible. Now, the way we do that is every segment of roadway is rated. We have a regular interval that we rate these roadways based on the condition, and there are two types of condition rating. There's what is referred to as a surface condition rating, and there's actually a pavement which looks at the foundation. Generally what we do is we look at the surface and evaluate the surface condition. That's the first sign of how well the road is doing. So when you look at a road, you see if there are any cracks, are there any patterns to the cracks relative to the age of the roadway. All of that stuff gives us an idea of what is going on in the roadway and the pavement of it. Ultimately, at some point, we may have to go in and do some testing. But based on the results of all of that, we put that together, and then we come up with a list of priorities of things that we need to do. Now, we have different classifications of roadway. So going back to the chart that I showed originally, that we have different classifications of roadway. So if you look at, for example, a road that's relatively new, there are treatments that we need to do to those. Those are relatively minor surface treatments. As the road progresses through, I'm going to call it the middle stage of its life, there's a little bit more aggressive treatments. And then ultimately when it gets to the point where it's degraded to the point that it needs a lot more aggressive treatment, that's classified in a third program. So what folks may see is, why this particular road needs treatment when it looks relatively new, but my road has a lot more worse cracks. And the reason we do that is we do divide the roads into three separate classifications. Those that are early on, we need to spend those dollar amounts because those are relatively less cost per mile, but that helps prolong the life. Eventually, those roads will get to the middle of their life and there's more aggressive treatments. We treat that in a separate program. And then finally, when it gets near the end of the program, there are a lot more aggressive treatments there are to be done to them, and then ultimately we may have to rehab them. So we work in three separate programs on an ongoing basis to make sure that all of our roads across the board are maintained based on a list of priorities, and we're not treating the oldest and letting the newest ones degrade. So we're trying to balance out the funding that we have available to us across the city.
What is the average lifespan of the pavement or a road?
Well, again, if you look at a typical road without any enhancements done to it from the time it starts to the end, and there's a lot of factors that influence that. The amount of traffic that's available on it, the weather conditions, the drainage conditions of the road. There's a lot of things, but on average about 18 to 20 years. With the improvements that we do, we can extend that life to as much as 30, sometimes even 35 years. So clearly the money that we spend early in the life of the pavement extends that life a lot more, to as much as 50% more in life. And
so the pavement management program is very, very necessary.
It is very necessary. It's a way to more efficiently manage the available resources, the funding that's available for the pavement, to maximize the pavement. And it's not all just about the money. It's really about, with every pavement operation, that it does cause an inconvenience to traffic. So by us doing early processes, that has less time frame to complete, there's less traffic issues versus the end where you have to pretty much tear up the road. That length of construction is longer, so you have a lot more inconvenience.
Along the lines of road construction, how do people find out what roads are being worked on right now or in the future, say a month or two in advance?
It is a very good question. We utilize multiple methods. Number one is clearly everything is available on the city's website. So if you go to the city's website, you'll see all of the projects that the city is working on, both streets and other non-street projects. Additionally, we put out press releases. And then the third item, we actually put out advanced signs for the neighborhoods, letting folks know that, hey, we've got construction coming up. If the work is within a neighborhood, we actually will go through the neighborhood with flyers and hanging on the door to let folks know that, hey, we're coming forward, here's the link to the project, here's what's going on, and then these are the things that you could do, these are the things that you can help us do. So all of these things are items that we can go ahead and notify people. And then ultimately we work with the council members and their assistants because they have newsletters and people subscribe to them. So we also send out the information that way. So we have a variety of different ways that we get the information out. It may be duplications, but different people look at different media, and we want to make sure that the word gets out as quickly as possible. So again, going back, as I said, you know, in the preservation of the pavement, there's something called the pavement preservation. That's the early stages of the treatment of a pavement. In there, we may use something like, you know, an emulsification type of material, and sometimes we'll go mixing that with some recycled rubber. We'll try to utilize recycled material as much as we can in our roads. Second item is called something like micro-sealing, and as the name implied, it's really intended to seal the road, to make sure that the weather does not penetrate it, and to replenish the oil that's available in there. Sometimes we mix that with sand and other types of material to kind of make that very durable. Then at that point, once we get into the middle life of the pavement, we get into things like patching and repairing as things happen. So if, you know, a utility company needs to get in and cut the road, we'll make sure that's patched. Sometimes maybe something happens to a particular segment of a road. We may have to go in and patch and repair that particular area. Maybe there's an accident on the road that causes damage to the roadway. We'll have to go in and fix it. And sometimes just naturally occurring roads will crack. As the winter months come in, the roads will contract because of the colder temperature, and as with the summer, they expand. So that movement of contraction and expansion will cause cracking. It's part of the nature of roads, and we just have to deal with that. So we go in and we make sure that we seal these to make sure that the environment does not penetrate the surface of the road and get down to the subgrade, because we have to protect the subgrade at all costs. Then as time goes on, the surface layer of the road gets worn out. So we have to go in and replenish that. And now what is called a wear-resistant type of a coating, and there's a lot of things that we do. For those of you that have been in the valley for a while can remember something called a chip seal, and the way that was done is we used to basically apply emulsion and just basically dump gravel on there and then come back and sweep it. And you know, a lot of folks did not like it because all of those gravel would fly out and would hit windshields, yes, and windshield would crack.
I'm a victim of a cracked windshield, yes.
So we progressed from that. We still continued that type of progress, but we changed the product. We went to what is called as a rubber-coated chip seal. And what that does is we use kind of more of angular type of material. They're coated in rubber, and they're displaced and compressed. By doing that, number one, they kind of fit together a lot better than just simply dumping the material. By being asphalt rubber coated, they tend to bind together a little bit. Unfortunately, some of the results of that is a little bit coarser type of material that with time, the coarseness of it will wear out. So we still use that in arterials and collectors, but we stopped using that in local streets simply because residents have complained about it. So we have to go to more aggressive routes in the residential areas. And then ultimately that road, no matter how many courses that we apply of a protective sealing, we still have to go back and rehab it and reconstruct it. And we finally had some roads that hit that mark, and this year was the first year that we've started that program. So what we do, we go into the areas that we've identified that need a lot more aggressive treatment. We'll test out the pavement and the subgrades in those areas. We'll see if there's things that we may not have been aware of throughout the inspections. And then once we're done, those streets that are beyond the normal, what I call routine maintenance, are set aside for this rehab and reconstruction program, where we'll go in and we'll simply remove either the complete surface layer or completely remove the asphalt of the road and rebuild it from scratch and start the cycle again. However, even with testing, some of the roads we look at them and saying, you know what, they still have some useful life, so we don't want to go in and prematurely replace them. Those roads will take that information that we've gained from this testing process, and we'll put them in either in the early stage or in the middle stage of the pavement maintenance program, and we go ahead and based on their condition, set the priority and do the treatment utilizing the other program. So again, we're consistently testing, analyzing, evaluating, and going back and make an adjustment. That's why it's really difficult for us to go in and assess the condition of the road or when a road will be changed that far in advance, because different things happen to the road and different conditions occur, and depending on funding, you know, it changes the program. But generally speaking, we will be able to know at least within a year or two when a road is needing something and when it's programmed to be replaced.
What if I have a bunch of cracks on, I noticed that my street is really starting to have a lot of cracks. Do I call the city? Do I need to say something? Should I report that?
Yeah, anytime you have any type of concern on your roadway, it's better to call the city, and we'll go out and we can make contact with you. You can either contact the city main number, and the phone number is available on the screen here, or you can go to the city's website and you can put in the information, or if you've downloaded the city app, you can go ahead and put in the information on there. Now what will happen at that point is we will send out one of our inspectors, will go out and take a look at it. A couple of things would happen. It's either maybe a relatively new crack or a damaged area, which means we'll put it in the order system, and then we'll go ahead and maintain it, and we'll repair it. Other times what happens is it may be just a normal crack that's there, but it could be maybe the winter months, and the cracks, because the pavement contracts, the cracks tend to open in the winter, so we get a lot of phone calls. So we'll go out there and take a look at it. Sometimes we may need to go back and refill them. Sometimes we'll look at them, yeah, although they're wide, you know, is there a hazard with that? If it's not a hazard, is the crack itself sealed to make sure that any weather, rain, or things that occur normally in nature are not penetrating the surface. So, and we'll respond to you and say, you know, we're aware of it, we fixed it, and or, you know what, this is normal cracking, we're scheduled to do more cracking in the future, or whatever it is, we'll get back with you and let you know. But it's always good if you have a concern about the roadway to let us know. And if you want one of our inspectors to meet with you, we'll be more than glad to go out and meet with you out on your road and explain to you the specific condition and explain why we're taking a specific action or not taking a specific action.
Okay, great, thank you.
Now, when you're taking a look at the roads, as I said, our roads are getting to the point where they're getting to be older. As a general rule, or as a general condition of our roads, about 30% of, or excuse me, 9% of those roads are 30 years old or older. And those are the roads that we're actually looking at for the rehab. The next category are roads that are kind of within the 26 to 30 years old. That's about 18% of our roadway. And then 21 to 25 years is 12%. And then 16 to 20 years, about 16%. So if you can take a look at this, basically more than half of our roadways are at least 15 years or older. So it's getting at the point where a lot more aggressive infrastructure needed. Then if you look at the 11 to 15 years is about 24%, and then relatively new roads, 0 to 10% is about 21%. So again, about 45% of our roadways are relatively in the kind of younger to mid-age, if you will, of roadways, and those are the ones that we tend to do the initial treatments and or maybe the milder types of treatments versus the balance of it, or about 55% of those we get into the aggressive treatment. If you look at our street program and the chart here in front of you, it does break out, first of all, looking at the types of roads we have, we break those out into an arterial, collector, and residential. We have approximately about 409 lane miles. What a lane mile is if you look at a particular 1 mile of roadway, let's say Bell Road, and if that particular road has 6 lanes in it, 3 lanes in each direction, we consider that as 6 lane miles. So that way we can identify and segregate a road into the actual number of lanes, because we want to make sure when we're calculating inventory, 1 mile of Bell Road is a lot more pavement to maintain than, let's say, 1 mile of, an arterial street or a collector street that has less pavement. So a lane mile is a more equitable measurement of the amount of roadways that we have. So in arterials is about 409 in a collector road, and usually those are what we call the half-mile roads, like Mountain View, or perhaps like a 57th Avenue or something like that. We have about 184 miles. And then ultimately in residential, we have about 838 miles of lane miles of road. As we look into those, I talked about earlier, there are various types of treatments that we do. And to give you an idea of what those treatments cost and the differences between them, if you look at the chart that's available on the screen, this is our expenditure that we did in fiscal year 2012. The crack sealing is simply, as the name implies, is if you have cracks in the road, we go in and seal them and protect us from elements. We did over 2.5 million linear feet of cracking at a cost of about 13 cents per linear foot. 13 cents may not seem like a lot, but when you have 2.5 million linear feet that you do on an annual basis, that's about $330,000 annually that we spend. The second item is something that is called microsealing. And again, the microsealing is one of the earlier stages of treatment where it goes in and kind of provides a renewed surface treatment to the road. We did about 823,000 square yards at a cost of $2.50 per square yard, or a total of just over $2 million. So that's something that we do roughly on an annual basis. And I'll talk about our funding here shortly. And then finally, it's something that is referred to as ARCS, or just simply chip seal. We did, in fiscal year 2012, about 170,000 square yards at a cost of $4.81 a square yard. And as you can see, as we go out with more aggressive treatment, the cost per square yard tends to increase. So although we're doing less amount, we're still spending a significant amount of dollars, just under $1 million in there. Now, as I talked about, in Peoria, we have a couple of programs available. We have something that is called the Street Maintenance Program. This is an annual program of approximately $2 million. And what that really, the program is for, is to do pavement sealing, minor resurfacing, crack sealing, and some patching work. So that's something that's programmed on an ongoing basis. We also have an arterial urban street program, which is done at $900,000 every other year. The reason we do this every other year is we took the funding that we had available to us annually, which was $450,000, and we lumped it together and made it every other year. We noticed that by lumping that dollar amount together, we can go out and do more roadways every other year. And because we don't have to spend as much money on mobilizing the equipment or the contractor mobilizing and demobilizing, we can get better bang for our buck here by combining every 2 years together. So we do that every other year. And generally that works well because in the off years when we're not doing the work, that's the year we go out and do the inspections and we do the ratings, and then the following year we do the improvements, and then we will keep repeating that cycle. And then ultimately this is the new program that we have created. We call that the Street Reconstruction and Rehab Program, and again, that's more of an aggressive treatment. We kind of strategically go in and we treat the pavement beyond the normal maintenance. This is a relatively new program. We have funding in fiscal year 13 and 14. And as the program continues, we'll be requesting more funding, but we wanted to see, first of all, how well this program is working. We wanted to identify the funding level. And again, we've got to work within our available resources. So currently that's only funded at $3 million a year, and it sounds like a lot of money, but $3 million will do approximately about 1 square miles worth of major improvements. So that's, it's not a lot of area that we can cover, but it is the level of need. Generally speaking, when you're looking at this level of road, if you recall earlier, I said in a chip seal we're about $4.50 a square yards. This type of treatment will cost us anywhere between $12 and $15 a square yard, so it's 3 times as much money. So again, that's a program that is available to us in fiscal year 13 and fiscal year 14, and we will be working with council and to identify future funding for this program as we progress. And if you take a look at the kind of how we're doing regionally, different cities have different programs, and it all depends really on the age of the city, the age of the roadways, and their needs. So if you look at Peoria, we're pretty much in line with other cities and other agencies, including ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation, and MCDOT, Maricopa County Department of Transportation. So we have a variety of different types of treatments, from patching of the potholes to crack sealing, seal coating, something we call a slurry seal or a micro seal. Again, those are surface type of treatment, to getting into the rubber chip seal, the milling and overlay, a lot more aggressive type of treatments, to going into ultimately reconstruction, or what we call in-place recycling, where we take the material and recycle it, and then ultimately pavement resurfacing by providing a rubberized coating over it. So all of those are types of treatments that are utilized across the valley, and we're always looking at different treatments out there. We want to make sure that as we look at a treatment, we're not just simply jumping to the newest and greatest things that's available out there, but we're also making sure that this treatment has been evaluated for the conditions that we are in. We see sometimes a lot of treatments that may work well in different weather conditions, but they don't fare fairly well here in the arid Southwest, where we have a drier climate, where we have sun and the temperatures in the magnitude of, about 100 and plus degrees for an extended period of time. So when you're looking at the kind of the pavement condition rating, it's really sort of like the grades in school. It's rated on a scale of 0 to 100. Again, 100 being a perfect road, brand new, going in. But we break that up into kind of more of a subcategory. If you look at the grades of 90 to 100, that's an A, that's an excellent road, and it works well. 80 to 89, that's sort of the B, it's a very good road, and there's specific criteria that we identify for our inspectors to make sure that we're getting consistent rating and we don't get one type of rating from one inspector versus the other. So we developed a criteria, but somebody that has a rating of 80 or better, it's very good. Then we get into the third category of 70 to 79, that's sort of the C category, or good. And then the 60 to 69 is fair, 50 to 59 is poor, and then 40 and below is really failing, and So we take a look at it. Generally speaking, roads that are in excellent condition, there's really not a lot of maintenance other than just keeping them up. As we go down the scale for very good or good, we'll do kind of the mild surface treatments. Then roads that are in fair conditions, we'll get into the kind of the more aggressive type of treatments. And then finally, when we get into the poor condition itself, then at that point, we'll go ahead and go to the more aggressive rehab type of treatment. So again, as I said earlier, people will come in and say, hey, my road has got major cracks and it needs a lot of repair, but you're in this other neighborhood and you're doing, the roads look a lot better and you're still doing treatment. And again, understand that we do treatments in all classifications of roadways, all different conditions of roadways, trying to manage it. We put a lot of money into the roads that need immediate attention, but we still have to spend money in the early life of the pavement to make sure that that life is extended, because we can spend a little bit less money in that segment of the roadway's life and still maintain its life versus the other roads where we're going to have to spend a lot more to bring them back. And ultimately, when we rehab the road back to the condition, it goes up. It never goes back to a perfect 100% unless we're simply removing the road completely and starting from scratch. But generally speaking, we can get it into the 95% to about the 99%, and that starts the cycle again.
Maher, thank you so much for being here and telling us more about Peoria's Pavement Management Program. And thank you for watching Eye on Public Works. I'll see you next time.